Elias was 60 feet in the air, miles from civilization, locked inside Fire Lookout Tower 4. He thought he was safe. He thought he was alone. Then, at 11:40 p.m., the radio turned on by itself. The voice on the other end wasn't a ranger. It was Elias's own voice. And it was reading his obituary. Elias sat in the glass box of Fire Lookout Tower 4, suspended 60 feet above the dense, black canopy of the Blackwood National Forest. It was his second season up here. Most people couldn't handle the isolation. 3 months of nothing but wind, pine needles, and the crackle of the radio. But Elias loved it. After the chaos of his life in Chicago, the silence wasn't just peaceful, it was medicinal. The tower was a small, square room surrounded by windows. At night, it felt like being in a submarine drifting through the deep ocean, miles away from the nearest human soul. It was 11:40 p.m. The wind was picking up, rattling the old window panes in their frames. Elias was brewing his third cup of coffee, the smell of roasted beans fighting against the smell of ozone and old dust. He walked to the main console. The CB radio, an ancient Motorola unit bolted to the desk, was his only lifeline to the outside world. Usually, it was just Ranger Dispatch checking in twice a day.
Tower 4 to dispatch. Night check. Visibility is low. Wind is picking up. Over.
He waited. Usually, Sarah from dispatch would reply with a tired joke about the weather, but tonight, there was only static. A thick, wet, heavy static that sounded less like interference and more like heavy rain hitting pavement.
Dispatch, you there? Over.
Silence. Then the static shifted. It didn't clear up. It changed. It tuned into a frequency that shouldn't have existed out here in the dead zone. A voice cut through. It wasn't Sarah. It was a male voice. Smooth, professional, and completely devoid of emotion. It sounded like a pre-recorded news broadcast.
Breaking news tonight. A tragic accident on Logging Road 7. Search and rescue teams have recovered the body of a hiker found at the base of the ravine. Time of discovery was 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Elias frowned, leaning closer to the speaker. He tapped the dial.
What the hell? Is this a crossover channel?
He knew Logging Road 7. It was the only access road to his tower. But the voice had said something impossible. It had said tomorrow.
The victim has been identified as a male, mid-30s, wearing a red jacket. Cause of death appears to be a fall caused by a collapsed railing.
Elias froze. The coffee cup hovered halfway to his mouth. He was wearing a red jacket, and he had hiked the ravine trail just that morning to check the perimeter.
This is a prank. Dispatch, is that you? Very funny.
He tried to laugh, but the sound died in his throat. The broadcast continued, ignoring him.
Authorities say the railing gave way due to rusted bolts. A tragic, preventable accident. We now return to our scheduled programming of silence.
The radio cut out with a loud POP, returning instantly to the empty, rhythmic hiss of normal static. Elias stood there, the wind howling outside the glass walls. He looked down at his red jacket. It was a standard-issue REI windbreaker. Thousands of people had one. It was a coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. But deep down, in the lizard part of his brain that sensed danger before he could name it, he knew something was wrong. The broadcast hadn't sounded like a warning. It sounded like a script. He walked to the window and looked down at the darkness below. The ravine trail was a mile away. He wasn't planning on hiking tomorrow. He would just stay in the tower. If he didn't go to the ravine, the broadcast would be wrong. Simple as that. He decided to sleep. He needed to clear his head. He woke up the next morning to a bright, piercing sun. The storm had passed. He felt foolish for being scared of a radio glitch. He made breakfast, stretched, and looked out at the stunning view of the mountains. Then, he saw it. Far below, on the winding dirt track of Logging Road 7, a search and rescue vehicle was parked. Its lights were flashing silently. Elias grabbed his binoculars. He focused the lenses on the ravine edge. A group of men were standing there, looking down. They were hoisting a stretcher up from the rocks. And on the stretcher, clearly visible against the gray stone, was a body bag. Next to the stretcher, an officer was holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside, it was a bright, torn piece of red fabric.
No. That's impossible. I'm right here.
He was looking at a crime scene that the radio had described 12 hours ago. But if they found a body in a red jacket, and he was standing in the tower wearing a red jacket, then who was down there? Elias stumbled back from the window, the binoculars clattering onto the metal desk with a loud crash. He lunged for the radio handset, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the plastic button down. He had to stop them. He had to tell them he was alive.
Dispatch! Tower 4 to dispatch! Emergency! Can you hear me?
Static hissed back at him, cold and indifferent. Then, Sarah's voice cut through. It sounded tinny, distant, and strangely hollow, as if she were speaking from the bottom of a well.
Tower 4, Elias? Is that you?
Yes, it's me! Listen, Sarah, I'm seeing a search and rescue team down on Road 7. They found a body. You have to tell them. Who is it? Who did they find?
There was a long, heavy pause on the line. When Sarah spoke again, her voice trembled with a mixture of confusion and fear.
Elias, the team is down there for you. They found your jacket. They found remains. We thought you fell.
The room spun. Elias gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling. He looked down at his chest. The red jacket was still there, zipped up tight. He touched the fabric. It felt real. It sounded real when he scratched it. But if they found his body, then what was he? A ghost haunting his own tower? Or was the world outside, the glass box, wrong?
I'm right here! I'm talking to you! Tell them to look up! I'm in the tower!
The connection cut with a sharp click. The familiar wet, heavy static returned, filling the small room like rising water. And then, the smooth, professional news anchor voice returned. It was louder this time. Closer.
Update on the Tower 4 incident. Following the discovery of the body, authorities are now responding to a structural fire at the lookout tower itself.
Elias backed away from the radio, his back hitting the cold glass of the window. The voice continued, relentless and calm, reading his future like a weather report.
The fire broke out at 11:55 p.m. tonight. Cause of ignition was a lantern overturned during a violent struggle. The occupant was not found.
Elias looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2 p.m. The broadcast was predicting a fire 10 hours from now. A struggle. He looked at the old hurricane lantern sitting on the shelf above the stove. It was unlit, full of kerosene. He grabbed it, opened the heavy metal trash bin, and threw it inside, slamming the lid.
No lantern. No fire. I'm changing the script.
He paced the small room. He was safe. He was 60 feet in the air. The trapdoor in the floor was bolted shut. No one could get up here without him hearing them on the metal stairs. But then, he heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a heavy, metallic clank from the steel gantry below. Someone was climbing the ladder. He froze. He looked down through the floor grate. He couldn't see the stairs directly below the platform.
Who's there? This is a restricted area.
There was no answer. Just the rhythmic, heavy sound of boots on metal. Clang, clang, clang. It wasn't a rescue team. They would have shouted. They would have radioed. This was slow, deliberate. Elias grabbed the flare gun from the emergency kit. He aimed it at the trapdoor. He waited. The footsteps stopped right beneath the floorboards.
Elias, open the door. You're messing up the timeline.
It wasn't the news anchor. It wasn't Sarah. It was his own voice. Elias felt his grip on reality fracture. The voice wasn't an echo. It was precise, modulated, and sounded exactly like him on a good day. Calm, rational, alive. But the real Elias was sweating, shaking, holding a plastic orange gun pointed at the floor.
I'm not opening anything. Go back to the ravine. You're dead.
The body is in the ravine, but the story needs the fire up here. You moved the lantern, Elias. Put it back.
Elias glanced at the metal trash bin where he had hidden the kerosene lantern. The entity knew. It could see through the floorboards. Or maybe it had already read the script.
There won't be a fire. I'm changing the ending.
He pulled the hammer back on the flare gun. The radio on the desk suddenly shrieked to life again. The volume was maxed out, the static painful and sharp. The news anchor's voice was no longer professional. It was hurried, breathless.
Breaking update. At 8:15 p.m., the occupant discharged a flare gun inside the structure. The projectile missed the intruder and struck the fuel reserve tank. Immediate combustion.
Elias looked at the clock. 8:14 p.m. He looked at the large propane tank attached to the stove, right next to the trapdoor. If he fired at the intruder coming through the floor, he would hit the tank. The radio wasn't predicting the future. It was trapping him into it.
Don't miss.
The trapdoor didn't just open. It was torn from its hinges. The metal bolts shrieked and snapped as the heavy steel door was ripped downward into the darkness. A hand reached up to grab the ledge of the floor. It was wearing a red jacket. Elias scrambled back, knocking over his chair. The intruder pulled himself up into the glass box. It was Elias. But it wasn't a mirror image. This version was wrong. His face was slack, pale, and his eyes were glassy, like a doll's eyes. His movements were jerky and wrong, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. And his red jacket was wet, soaked with dark, muddy water from the ravine. The doppelganger stood up, dripping onto the metal floor. He looked at Elias, then at the flare gun, then at the propane tank.
It's time for the fire, Elias. The audience is waiting.
He lunged. Elias didn't think. He didn't check the time. He squeezed the trigger. The flare gun kicked in his hand. A blinding streak of magnesium fire shot across the small room. It missed the doppelganger's head by an inch. It slammed directly into the valve of the propane tank.
No! No!
The hiss of leaking gas filled the room instantly, mixing with the blinding red light of the burning flare on the floor. The doppelganger didn't attack. He just stood there, bathed in the red glow, and smiled.
Perfect.
The room didn't explode immediately. A wall of blue and orange flame separated Elias from the trapdoor. He was trapped in the glass box with the thing wearing his face. The doppelganger didn't move to escape. He walked into the fire. He stood amidst the rising flames, his wet clothes steaming, his wax-like face unburnt. He pointed a dripping finger to the heavy steel door leading to the outside catwalk.
Go outside, Elias. The railing is waiting.
Elias scrambled for the handle, choking on the smoke. The heat was blistering. He kicked the heavy door open and stumbled out onto the narrow steel catwalk that circled the tower, 60 feet above the ground. The night wind hit him hard, feeding the fire inside the glass box behind him. He grabbed the railing to steady himself and looked back. Through the glass, he saw the fire dying down, as if the entity's presence was suffocating it. The doppelganger was sitting at the desk now. He was calm. He picked up the radio handset.
You're going to burn! Get out!
The entity inside turned its head. It pressed the transmit button on the radio. Its voice boomed through the external speaker on the roof and through the handset on Elias's belt.
This is Tower 4 to dispatch. Fire contained. The previous occupant has been removed. Shift change is complete.
Elias backed away, horrified. The thing wasn't destroying the tower. It was climbing it. It had orchestrated the entire timeline. The broadcast, the body, the fire, just to force Elias out of the glass box. He hit the railing with his back. The rusted bolts, the ones the radio had warned him about in the very first broadcast, screamed under his weight.
No! No! I changed it!
The metal gave way with a sharp snap. Gravity took him. He fell backward into the black void, the glowing red tower receding above him like a dying star. The fall felt impossibly long. He had time to see the moon. He had time to regret the flare. He hit the rocks at the base of the ravine. Pain, then numbness. He couldn't move his legs. He couldn't feel his arms. He lay there on the cold stone, staring up at the dark canopy. He was the body in the red jacket. He had always been the body. His radio, cracked but still clipped to his belt, crackled to life one last time. The static was gone. The voice was crystal clear.
Final update. Rescue teams have confirmed the identity of the victim. A tragic accident. Time of death.
Elias tried to speak, to beg for help, but his lungs were collapsed.
Now.
The radio went silent. High above, in the tower, the light went out. Elias watched the darkness close in, listening to the sound of the wind in the pines, sounding exactly like a lullaby. From the darkness of the ravine, Elias saw one last thing before his eyes closed forever. High above, the light in the tower flickered back on. A silhouette stood in the window, warm and safe, holding a fresh cup of coffee. It looked down into the black void and gave a small, polite wave. The shift change was complete.